welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to our very first Generation Focus Head Teachers webinar. My name is Claire Fernie-Huff. 2 years ago, I co-founded the Smartphone Free Childhood movement as a concerned mother of a 9-year-old daughter. Through my work in the last 2 years, I've been lucky enough to work closely with head teachers across the country. I've seen how quickly change can happen when parents and schools work together and when schools support parents to delay giving smartphones to their children. One thing I want to emphasise first up is that this is not schools' problem and it should not be up to schools to fix this damaging societal norm. And we believe that we should have stronger government support for head teachers. And that's why I've teamed up with Miriam and Charlotte to launch Generation Focus to campaign for a national prohibition of smartphones in school settings. But time, as we know, is precious, and this generation of school children just cannot afford to wait any longer, which is why we want to support all secondary schools to remove smartphones. We know you're really busy as head teachers and frankly have got better things to be doing. So we want to make it simple and easy by sharing insights from head teachers who have already taken the plunge and gone smartphone free. Today, we're joined by a panel of secondary school head teachers who've all done it. Lucy Harrison from Archer Academy in Barnet, David Smith from Fulham Boys School in London, and Faye Bowler from Braunton Academy in Devon. They'll all be talking through what they did, why they did it, and the impact that they've seen. And you'll have a chance to ask them questions at the end. So thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to hand over to Charlotte to introduce herself.
Thanks very much, Claire. My name's Charlotte Ashton. My background is in journalism and communications, and I've been working closely with primaries and secondaries here in Warwickshire to help them go genuinely smartphone free. That journey is not without challenge, but head teachers who have gone to brick phones only, without exception, tell us that it's one of the best things they've ever done. So we've consolidated best practice into a toolkit that I'll run through with you later in this webinar. We are focusing on secondaries in this because smartphones are so much more wired into children's lives and indeed the school day from year 7 onwards. And we do urgently need to better safeguard secondary students from distraction, but also from the other harms we know smartphones are causing. But the other reason that we are so passionate about this and are so focused on supporting secondary schools is that we've seen firsthand that when secondaries go smartphone free, it unlocks wider societal change. When secondaries and primaries, but critically secondaries, send out a clear message that smartphones are neither safe nor appropriate for children, parents delay giving their children one in the first place. And that's the change we ultimately all want. So you'll hear a bit more from me later, but I'll hand to Miriam for a brief introduction now.
Lovely. Thanks, Charlotte. Hi, everyone. I'm Miriam Turner, co-founder of Generation Focus with Claire and Charlotte, and I'm former CEO of Friends of the Earth, so I have a campaigning background. And as we were discussing, very glad to now be applying that experience to building parliamentary pressure for a national prohibition of smartphones in school settings. I'm also mum of twins who've just moved up to secondary here in Devon. So I've spent a lot of time working with our local secondary, actually a colleague of Faye's who's on the panel, and also with Devon County Council on brick-only policies across the county. And just before I hand back to Claire and the panel, as Charlotte said, we will focus on the secondaries on this call, but we're really glad to have primary leaders here too, because we know that we really need consistent messaging to parents from as early as possible, that delaying giving our children smartphones makes them safer and better able to learn, socialise and grow. And Faye in particular will talk about the importance of primary and secondary collaboration with policy launches. So more than enough from us. Back to you, Claire, to introduce the panel.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And yeah, we'll dive straight in and I'll come to you first, Lucy. You are head at Archer Academy, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your school. We'd love to hear about the policy that you implemented, why you did it, the impact you've seen. And I think probably what lots of people are going to be interested in is your tips for success, really. So yeah, over to you.
Well, thank you, Claire, and thank you for all of the team at Generation Focus and head teachers. Thank you for giving up time at this point in the day to make you all chuckle as fellow head teachers. My office has been taken over by students having their mock French and Spanish speaking exams this afternoon, and I'm currently in the food technology room. So if that makes any other head teacher chuckle this afternoon, I'm sure it will. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon to talk about something that is one of the best things that I have done as a head teacher. And I think I would find it very difficult to ever change my mind about that. And that's a phrase that I often use with parents and young people. I am the head teacher of an 11 to 16 specialist school in North London. And we opened in 2013 as a new free school, as part of the free school movement that was developing at that time. We opened to 1 year group originally and then brought in an extra year group year on year over the following 5 years. The 2013-2014 was a really powerful time for us as a school community. We were setting out our reputation, we were establishing ourselves, we were ensuring that we were providing a first-class education, but most importantly, that we were building a community. As we moved through into the 2014-2015 academic year, we then had 2 year groups in our school, year 7 and year 8. And in the early spring of that year, we started to experience a number of issues related to smartphones in our school. Now, note, this was over 10 years ago, and the world was very different then in relation to the technology that is available, the way that we think about technology, and the way in which young people were accessing it. WhatsApp was a relatively new thing. Young people having phones that had cameras on them was a relatively new thing. And what I experienced over that spring term of 2015 was a number of really difficult instances in my school community. Instances of young people filming themselves in bathrooms with one another, either young people knowing that that was happening or not happening and posting that information on social media sites. Filming instances in classrooms with teachers that teachers understandably found very difficult. And coupled with that, a number of instances where WhatsApp groups were being used within classes and around classes that led to some really unpleasant online behaviour. When unpicking all of this behaviour, it was really hard for our community. We only had 2 year groups at that point. We were really small, we were really new, we were doing great things, and yet we were dealing with some really unpleasant behaviours that were difficult for us to deal with, were really hard for parents to deal with, and really upsetting for the young people once they began to break down what had happened. And as I was reflecting on these instances and how much it shook my school community, I kept coming back to a point in myself of, why do we have to have this noise in our school? This noise is so distracting from our young people outside of school. Can I not have the opportunity to quieten it? And it brought me back to a memory of when I was a head of year and BlackBerry phones were just becoming all the rage amongst young people. And I was a head of year 11. Phones came amongst teenagers so very, very quickly that schools had to race to catch up. And I remember having to take a BlackBerry phone off a young person because they were being really inappropriate with it in a classroom. And that very cool, very trendy year 11 student having a full-on 2-year-old tantrum outside my office. And it was a moment that I shall always remember, because it was then that I realised how important these devices were becoming to teenagers. And so as I fast forwarded into the spring now of 2015, I felt I needed to do something really different. And so I took the decision at that point that I was going to ban smartphones from the upcoming September, and that I didn't feel that they had a place in our school, that we needed as teachers and parents together to enable our young people to enjoy school for what it was, to stay children, to focus on their learning and on their friendships. Now, you can imagine that I might have been slightly nervous about making this announcement to my parent community. I was. I couldn't quite work out how it might land. But whilst I was nervous, I was also absolutely sure that I knew I was doing the right thing. And as fellow head teachers, you will know that feeling. When you know you're doing the right thing, you just need to get on with it. And that's what I decided to do. I made the announcement in the June to all of my parents. I did that in person through parent meetings and to the incoming year 7. And as I made the announcement to my first year group, a moment that will always stay with me is that they just broke into a round of applause, because they were relieved that I was joining them in that discussion around smartphones, and that they didn't need to have such a constant presence in young people's lives. And it was from that round of applause onwards that I've been further sure that I have done the right thing. So from the September of 2015, we have had a very simple rule in place. And I would urge all of you as head teachers to keep it really simple from the outset. You need to do what works for you and your community, but the less grey lines or grey margins there are around your rules, the better. So our simple rule has always been that young people may bring a brick phone to school, but that brick phone cannot have a camera and it cannot have access to the internet. That if they have a brick phone, it has to be turned off in their bags all day and it cannot be used during school. And that's been my simple rule. I have always said that I don't believe I should have to go looking for smartphones, that I believe that I should be able to expect that my young people and their parents will trust the rules of the school. And it is part of our homeschool agreement that if you are sending your child to my school, that you will abide by those rules. And I've always been very clear that you can choose to send your child to another school if that's not a rule that you want to follow. And again, I would encourage that if you know you're doing the right thing for your school community, that you stick really hard and fast to that. I have always said that the outcome of bringing a smartphone to school is a Saturday morning detention with me from 8:30 till 10:30 in the morning. That tends to put most young people off, and we have held that throughout the last 10 years. But if I was to share with you that we did a bag search 2 weeks ago, and I'll talk about bag searches in a minute, and we found 2 smartphones in the whole school, I think that gives you a sense of how well embedded it is. And I know that I'm in a privileged position to be 10 years on. But those 2 young people got to enjoy their Saturday morning detention with me. And we make sure that everybody knows that that has happened as well. So from the outset, I would say being really clear and really simple about those expectations, but also celebrating what you're doing as a community is really important. It can quickly become a negative thing. You're not allowed this. You can't do that. And I feel that what that can do to young people, and perhaps also to parents, is to make them more curious about the phone, or to decide that the phone is more important to them. Celebrating what we're doing as a community is really enabling. So we will often talk very openly about how much our children are still children in our school, that they play together, that they talk to each other, that they talk to each other on the way to and from school as well. That we know in our community, and this may be the same for you, that street crime is a real issue, and that in fact our young people are much safer not having a smartphone on them than if they did have a smartphone, and that it's very known in the local area that young people in wearing my school uniform don't have smartphones on them, and the police have always been incredibly supportive of that. The other thing that we celebrate is that we have a shared language around smartphones. And what I've found is that parents have found that incredibly supportive, because if they're trying to put boundaries in place at home to support their young people, doing it on their own can feel really hard. Because if they're saying to their child, you can't have your smartphone at this point, or we don't want you to use your smartphone at this point, that's really hard to do on their own. But if every parent is doing it with a shared language around it, it's quite empowering for parents and quite enabling for family life as well. So what would I say about where we are now? I've never changed the policy in all of the 10 years. I haven't amended it at all. I've stuck with exactly the same rules. We've had to change the images slightly around what a brick phone looks like, because some of the new technology is creating things that look like smartphones that are in fact brick phones. That really did catch my deputy head out with a brand new Year 7 a couple of weeks ago. But other than that, everything has stayed exactly the same. I have always said, if I get a little feeling that perhaps we've all forgotten that we don't bring smartphones to school, that we will do bag searches, and we do those periodically. We have a bag search policy that is in place, that is shared with all parents and all young people, and it's completely randomly applied. But as I said, when we did that 2 weeks ago, we found 2 smartphones in the entire school. But everybody knows that we do that. It's very open that that might happen. But I would say if we do it more than once a half term, that's pushing it, unless I've got a particular feeling that something might be going on. I would urge all head teachers to think about what things can make a real difference to behaviour, to relationships, and to a focus on learning. That's what we're all here for. We can get caught up in so many other distracting things. I've got a governors meeting this evening all about finance and audit. I'm sure some of you have as well. That can take up quite a lot of time. But one thing that we can all do that can enable our children to be children, to enjoy their time at school, for parents to be able to support their young people in making good choices for themselves, and for teachers to be able to concentrate on teaching, is to take away those smartphones. All you want, which I think is probably the same as me, is for your schools to be able to concentrate on the joy of learning, young people being safe and thriving, and teachers being able to do a good job, and for things not to get in the way. I think taking smartphones away really enables all of that, if you can keep it as simple as possible and celebrate the difference it makes. We had a whole school rehearsal on a Saturday, dress rehearsal for our end of year play. And for some reason, the head of drama had let the young people bring their smartphones because it was on a Saturday. We don't usually let them bring them for anything, residential trips, anything at all. But for some reason, she had allowed it on that Saturday because some of them had recordings of songs on their smartphones. And she came to me afterwards and said, "I'll never do that again, Lucy," because they didn't talk to each other. The minute they weren't rehearsing, they were on their phones. And she realised the difference that had made to across whole school. Imagine having year 11 sevens all together all day, singing and dancing. But what was really interesting was some of the students came and said the same thing to me as well, that it affected the feel of what is usually a really special day. I hope that's helpful. I hope that gives you a sense of what's possible. But I really would urge you to take the opportunity to feel that you have made a really positive difference to your young people, your staff, and to the parents of your community as well. Thank you.
Lucy, thank you so much. I think the clarity and the simplicity that you've gone for, and that kind of reducing those grey areas, is so very, very powerful. So thank you so much for that. We will now come to David Smith from Fulham Boys School.
Hello, nice to meet you all. It's really good to speak to so many head teachers. It's quite a privilege, really. We're in a very different situation. So I lead a free school, which is very similar to what we've heard before. We started in 2014, and up until just over a year ago, our phone policy was really clear. The boys in our school, an all-boys school, they could have their phones with them, but it had to be off and switched off in their bags. And if we saw them, we'd confiscate those phones and keep them till the end of the day, and a parent would have to come and collect them. I have always been uneasy about phone use, and not just because of what happens inside schools, but outside of schools. So we spent a lot of time looking at the use of phones, why students had phones. We spent a lot of time talking to staff about phones as well. We did some briefings with staff about their own phone use, and the average staff member came to the conclusion that they are addicted to their own phone. So we took our staff on a bit of a journey of what is going on with phones. The school governors and the SLT, we read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, to go on a bit of a journey on what is research saying about phone use, and does it correlate to our own experience as educators. And we came to a position that actually we just weren't happy with the young people in our care having phones. But I want to make it clear that we didn't make any decisions to do with phones because of behaviour or because of academics. So we're in a very fortunate position. We're in the top 2 or 3% of the country academically. Admissions are through the roof. The behaviour is very strong. For me, this is a moral piece that we wanted to have the real stance to parents to say, actually, please consider buying your child a smartphone. Do you need to buy them one? It's not just they don't need to have one in school. Actually, should they have one altogether? So we did the briefings with staff. We did a survey with students, so an anonymous survey with the whole student population. 97% had a smartphone, which is not unusual. We thought that'd be the case. 56% got it in year 5 or year 6, so when they're 9 or 10 years old. 42% said they get at least 50 notifications a day, 11% over 200 notifications a day, and 38% had unrestricted access. And that's the one that worried me the most. So 38% of the boys in my care, they could look at their phones whenever they wanted. They look at whatever they wanted to, in any kind of way they wanted to. I don't need to go into some of the things that our young people use phones for. It will be exactly the same for all of you. Everything under the sun that I could ever possibly imagine could go wrong in this school has gone wrong at some point through phone use. So I knew that was an issue. I spoke to some boys anecdotally. I remember talking to a boy in year 10, asked him when's the first time he watched pornography. He said it was when he was in year 7 on a school residential trip at the Fulham Boys School. And that really got to me. I just thought it didn't matter what his parents did outside of school. On my watch, he went on a residential, someone showed him something, and he's been addicted to pornography ever since. And I just don't think that's acceptable. So we held a lot of consultation events with parents. We spoke to them. I did coffee mornings, coffee afternoons, and we announced in May that in September 2024, we were going to have free brick phones available to students for students to buy. Those brick phones, you can only text or call, so no cameras whatsoever, and you can't have a smartphone. So you can't bring it to school, you can't take it home from school, you can't have it at school. If a student is seen to have a smartphone on them at any time, or we search them because we believe they have one, we confiscate that for 6 school weeks. So just to give a bit of detail on that, I took a phone in June. They didn't get their phone back till October, which sounds absolutely crazy. So we've designed 6 school weeks, which means you lose it for a holiday as well. I think, like the previous head teacher, when I announced this and spoke about this at open evenings, so the year 6 is coming through and to my new year 7s, it's the first time and the only time in my career I've ever had a round of applause. So the parents of the younger generation of students, they're just absolutely delighted. There was a vocal minority of the older students and those parents who weren't sure if it was the right thing because they've been used to parenting in a certain way. We've done a lot of work since in terms of how to parent differently, how to get across London without using a phone, all of those kind of things. In the first term, we confiscated about 40 phones, and I had to deal with some of that. We had to tweak our policy. We didn't mention SIM cards in our policy. We now have that one in there that we don't give SIM cards back either. So when we take the phone, we take the whole thing. This term, I've confiscated probably 4. We did a bag search for the whole of year 10 about a couple of weeks ago. I didn't find a single phone at all for the whole of year 10. Some had a brick phone. Most don't even bother bringing them in. And what it means is they can just be children. I think exactly what you've already just heard. You wouldn't have seen phones in the building anyway before, but it's outside the building as well. It's coming to school. It's going home. We're taking 125 boys skiing in 2.5 weeks' time. We did the same last year. I was on the trip. We had an 18-hour coach journey. No one had their phone. We had a great time. No student could contact their parents for the week unless they had to go through a teacher, which meant that they could just be who they wanted to be. It took all the emotion out of everything in terms of distress with home life, and we could really do something with our young people in our care. I think what's really key for me is I talk about controlling the narrative. We educate around sex before they're having sex. I think that's really important. We need to educate around smartphone use before they have smartphones. Our 6th formers have a smartphone. They can use them in designated places. Our boys know that as they get older, at some point they will get those devices. But I want to control the narrative of this is why your body is important. This is what a woman is or a girl is. This is how you should socialize. This is why the world is the way it is. And I think we are educators, and the best way to educate is to do it when they don't have the device already. It's had a massive impact in the school. My safeguarding lead would say we've had a 90% reduction in child sexual exploitation. So everything from sexting to grooming, all of those issues, it's massively depleted, particularly with the younger years. And our parents and our boys are happier. Our admissions were higher. They're higher than ever before. We had an Ofsted consultation visit last term. We invited them in to try their new framework. Not a big fan, but we tried the new framework and they were delighted with it. The younger parents are delighted with it. I think from a head teacher's perspective, making the decision actually gives you more credibility. The parents feel like the school stands for something, and the young people are educated in a different way. Last thing I'd like to mention is pouches. We did consider pouches. I contacted Yonder. They came in. We got £30,000 quote. We went to another school, saw what they did, and we decided not to go down that route. For me, having a pouch is saying to a parent, your child needs a phone, but they can put it in a pouch because the phone affects education, but you can have the phone outside of education. I think that was the wrong message. Actually, I don't believe a young person needs a phone. And I believe it's trying to do the right thing in the kindest possible way. And the right thing is to remove those phones altogether. I often say to parents, I talk about my daughter all the time. She's just joined year 7 in a school where they have phones. I think she got to school today. I have no idea because she doesn't have a phone. I presume she's alive. I'm sure she is. She's healthy, she's happy, and she's better off without one than with one. So that is our approach. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, David.
That was literally to the second 7 minutes.
What a pro. Thank you, David. I think, what you've said about pouches is very, very interesting in terms of the kind of unwittingly cementing the status quo is an interesting thing there. But also, yeah, what would be viewed as a very strict policy, the policy that you have, actually how popular it's been with parents, and actually how you're empowering kids to know how to get across London without a phone, which I think is just such an important skill for everyone. So thank you so much. Right, Faye, we will come to you now. You are from Braunton Academy, and yeah, over to you.
Okay, hello, lovely to meet everyone. I'm from Braunton Academy. Braunton is known supposedly as the largest village in England. There's about 3,000 people that live there. We're a small town in North Devon. So some of the things I'm going to talk about are the differences from maybe trying to set this up in a city community to if I was doing this in quite a rural small community. There's some real positives about how we were able to do it and other barriers that you might need to consider if you're in those sorts of situations. What I'm really lucky about, and I was ahead in Manchester before, is that coming here, 85% of my students come from just 5 primary schools or within the catchment area, and that gave us a really special sort of ability to communicate and work with them. So we have a policy not just for the academy, but actually runs over the 6 schools, all 5 primary schools, and ourselves. We're not a multi-academic trust. I'm a SAT, but we do have a sort of cooperative trust, how we work together. Exactly the same as David, we had the not seen, not heard policy beforehand. We would average probably confiscate about 9 phones a week. However, we did have issues of sometimes children bringing their parents in toilets and then having to deal with that situation. Communication, break and lunch, you'd see a lot more kids hanging around toilets. That what exactly are they doing? It's not just about going to the loo, and in lessons. And again, like David, very much so, behaviour wasn't a massive issue in our school. It never has been. It wasn't done for that reason, but we have seen positive impact from having put that in place since September. So we came to this at about April last year. I was reading things around the anxious generation. I was talking to other schools about what they were doing. And at the same time, smartphone free Braunton sort of group came forward and started talking to some of our primary schools, because they had parents who were anxious that their child was just about to go up to the academy and they didn't want to buy a phone. And there was this real perception from parents that they had to buy them a phone by the time that they got to secondary school. And so smartphone free approach to primary school. At the same time, I spoke to the primary school saying, I think we need to work together. And it ended up with a really great collaboration. And I think if you have got those people in your community, that working party of parents, particularly in the primaries, that you can engage early and work with you, then it's a fantastic opportunity, because that really helped us move that through. So we ended up doing a questionnaire, but we did it across all of the 6 schools. So the 5 primaries and the secondary. People identified which primary they went to, but what year group their child was in. And they were able then to talk about when they wanted to get their child a phone or at what age they had done. And we could start to get that momentum talking about whether they felt a smartphone free policy would be a good thing, of which 75% of parents came back saying that they felt that it would, and that if we had put one in place, it would have supported them in making it later that they bought theirs for their children. So we did that group consultation, and we did student voice exactly the same as David, and that really gave me the mandate, because 50% of our students told us that their parents never checked their mobile phone, and 50% of children told us that they had their phones in their bedrooms overnight. So in terms of my ability as a head teacher to monitor what was coming into school, what content was being shared during the school day, coming in on the phones, I have that real mandate to say that actually we can't do that, because we haven't got that buy-in from parents at home to be checking them regularly. 95% of students were against this policy. However, since putting it in place, even my worst year 11 culprits last year comment on how much better it's made it for them, and particularly how much they talk more. They always did do a lot. Our kids skip, year 11 girls skip at lunchtime. We have a lot of sport going on, but it certainly improved those things for them. The other thing that I did specifically, having spoken to David, because he was part of our research when we decided to do it, he talked very much about how, you know, he'd had people saying, oh, the police, I'm going to report you to the police because you've stolen a phone and things like that. So again, being a local community, we actually contacted our local community police officers before we put this in place. They came in, they gave us advice. We were able to put it in our policy that we communicated with the police, who very much said, you're allowed and entitled to confiscate phones, that sort of took away a lot of the sort of arguments that we get when parents, the child has their phone confiscated. Like David, we've gone for a confiscation period. We've agreed to it as 4 weeks. It's 2 weeks in the primary schools, moving to 4 weeks when they come into secondary. And again, we do the same, that if it gets taken in the last couple of weeks of term, they don't get it back until after the holidays. From there, we've started in September, and since then we've had about 50 phones that we have taken out of a school of 870 students. We again have had to do whole bag class checks when a phone's gone off, and maximum we usually pick up is about 2 phones. So the impact's been very quick. The only thing that we've also done is we have metal detectors, because particularly some of our boys will keep them down the back of their pants and in their back pockets, which means that we do check that at the same time if we have to do a bag search. It's very early days in our process. We're just at the end of the first term. We haven't done this for behaviour, but it has had an impact. We've seen a 10% reduction in just normal behaviours within school. We've seen reduction in suspensions. We've seen a significant reduction in safeguarding issues around mobile phones again. Bullying outside of school. We've not had the usual year 7 WhatsApp groups that form and cause that low level conflict that takes place in school. But our sexting, grooming, serious safeguarding incidents have completely almost disappeared. I think we've had 2 this term compared to maybe 8, 9 that you'd be dealing with regularly. I think one of my biggest things that I was worried about is how a parent's going to react. Having the primary school parents so positively for it, and being in a small community, they acted as my voice. We did consultation evenings beforehand, but they went out there and argued the point. And because we're a small area as well, there's a, village community chat. So of course it all got put on there to begin with, but they were the ones that were having the arguments with parents. They did a lot of that for us. They came to the consultation evening. Smartphone Free Braunton did the presentation to parents. They attended year 6 evenings, sports evenings, things that allowed us to see that it wasn't just the school doing it, but there was that real community. And I think it has allowed them to sort of dominate rather than maybe the 1 or 2 parents that have been very much against it. When I first put the policy out, I had 15 complaints from parents, and I got an additional 15 in September for the ones that hadn't read the policy when I announced it in the June, July. From that, I only had 3 that led to formal complaints, and only 1 that has ever got to stage 2. And I think one of my biggest concerns was how parents were going to react. From that, the biggest thing we've had to deal with is parent anxiety, and particularly differences of being rural. Our transport networks are not good. Buses get cancelled. Children have to get home on lanes without street lights, those sort of things. Those were the biggest things that parents were concerned about. Split families, we've had quite a bit of pressure on in the fact that, how do they get their phone over a weekend from one parent to another? We've held very firm on not accepting any phone for any reason. But it's one that if you're going to do that, I think it's a good one to have that conversation with parents right from the beginning, and for them to understand with that. And we've had issues financially because our local bus company at the moment will not give discounts to children for 5-day tickets unless they use their smartphone app, which means we are subsidising at the moment certain students so that they can come in without a smartphone, particularly as it's impacting more of our pupil premium students live outside of the catchment area, so they're hitting the most vulnerable. We have managed to get a meeting with them next week, and hopefully they will work with us, but I'm aware that our transport in Devon is doing something slightly different than a lot of the country. But they're the things that we didn't realise were going to be an issue, that if you're considering this policy, it's a good thing to consider at this stage.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Faye. And yeah, particularly the bus tickets issue, which is something we hear a lot. So yeah, really interesting one to bring up. Thank you. Just going to throw to Charlotte now, who's going to share our toolkit, which we have put together really based on insights from head teachers. So yeah, very interested in thoughts on that. So over to you, Charlotte.
There we go. There we are. I'm on mute. Lovely. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, this toolkit we put together based on the work we've been doing with head teachers around the country who've gone to brick phone only policies. It's for you to kind of cherry pick from depending on what is relevant to your setting and your kind of leadership style. We've divided it into 3 broad phases. The first is the educate phase, which I think Faye and David have spoken to, particularly around surveys. It is very useful to have data around how smartphones are impacting your students at home and at school, because we know there's a disconnect. Research shows a disconnect between what parents think is happening on their children's phones and reality. So being able to have evidence, for example, we did a survey in rugby, 25% of year 10s there were on their phones for more than 7 hours a day. And the majority had no parental control. So being able to disabuse parents of any illusion that this is not happening to our children in our communities right now is very helpful and can build consensus, about the scale and urgency of the problem. We have on our website all of these resources for you to look at. We've got the parent survey that Faye referred to from Braunton and that local area. And that's helpful for establishing, as she said, kind of how many parents are supportive of tighter restrictions. And if you can share that among your primary feeders as well, that's very helpful, because we know there's a lot of support there for tighter restrictions. That evidence allows you to do kind of data-driven staff and parent education. Usually it's not difficult to get staff on board, but it's helpful to be able to show parents that there is support for these measures. In terms of education for students, we'd urge you to focus on algorithmic literacy. We did an assembly in rugby, again, the same school we did the survey in recently, and we really focused there on how the algorithms work and on the financial drivers behind the whole attention economy. And that just enables young people to reconsider their relationship with these addictive by design platforms. I think David alluded to doing a number of different coffee mornings and sessions. One teacher said to us last week she wishes she'd done 8 at different times of the day and week, so that parents can't say, we didn't know about this, we didn't have an opportunity to engage. Consultation, I know it's different from school to school. Generally, you will get, what we're hearing is that there will be a vocal minority, but I think that goes for pretty much any decision that a head teacher makes. There will be a vocal minority that pushes back, but the majority are silently supportive. It's useful to identify champions within your communities, police, doctors, and even sixth formers who, with the benefit of a bit more wisdom and hindsight, might be able to share their recent experiences of what smartphones are doing in those settings. I've just got an issue with my slides, so give me 1 second. Just to share the next one. This is all on our website, so do have a look there. The second stage is the activate stage. This is all about the policy, about getting the policy right. And I think is what's really come out strongly here is that simple is better. Be watertight on the logistics. So schools have been tripped up where parents say, oh, actually, though, she needs it on the bus, or, identify every point in the school day where a smartphone is currently required. And if COVID showed us anything, it's that we can quite quickly rewire that. Having a confiscation period that is a genuine deterrent seems to be coming out as absolutely key for success. So 3 to 6 weeks being the norm. Putting SLT in charge of confiscations avoids teachers having to be in that sort of conflict situation, and clearly briefing every member of the staff team, including those parent-facing staff members, and thinking on the front desk. We are hearing from schools, be a kind of surge in phone calls to the front desk for the first few weeks as parents kind of readjust to not being able to constantly message their children. So that's a little heads up for your reception staff. And then there's the communicate phase. Now, the education piece would have sort of paved the way for this, so it shouldn't come as a surprise to your communities. I think something that's come through clearly is emphasize the benefits here. This is giving children something, it's not taking anything away from them. And then with my crisis comms hat on, don't let a messaging vacuum form. So make sure that on the same day you go to your student body and your parents, such that the policy is waiting for parents in their inboxes when children get home with the big news. I'm going to leave it at that because we do need to get to questions and answers, but this is all on our website. And if you have any more questions, please do get in touch with us. But there are downloadable templates and more detail on those 3 phases I've just gone through or at generationfocus.org. Thanks very much. And I'll share that link in the chat just now.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. So I'm going to hand over to Miriam now to do Q&A, because I'm sure lots of you have got questions for our panel or reflections. So Miriam, over to you.
Lovely. Okay, so if anyone has a question, just pop your hand up on Zoom, or if we can't find that tech-wise, just wave ferociously at me and then hopefully I'll see you.
You can also put questions in the chat if you would like to do it that way.
Yeah.
Peter.
Hello, good afternoon. Really useful, thank you. 2 questions. First of all, the buses is going to be something that I would have to navigate. So interested if anyone here has had successful dialogue or solutions, because our local bus companies all run the best deals through apps. And secondly, to the head teachers who have implemented, I have some students currently, when we try and confiscate a phone, who will refuse to cooperate with I've had just last week, I'll take a suspension, thanks. So how they've navigated that to ensure that they're successful with their confiscations. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Peter. Should we take that one first? Anyone on the panel want to come in on the confiscations issue?
I'll come with confiscations. I think if students refuse to give it, we ring the parents and we say we will suspend your child and you're going to have to come and collect them. Often that parent has a go at their child and tells them just to hand it over because the parent doesn't want to be inconvenienced. Our approach is always, you can't come back to school unless you understand you've done wrong on any issue. So if they come back the next day, they have to hand in their phone in order to understand they've done wrong, or I suspend them again. And I've threatened some students, if I suspend them 5 times for the same reason, I'll have to permanently exclude them. That's never got that far. I've never suspended a child for not handing a phone over. I have rung several parents, but they've always handed the phone over.
So just quickly follow up on that. So if you suspend on the reintegration meeting, because we always do a reintegration with parents the next morning, do you ask for the phone to be handed over at reintegration so that you can do your standard confiscation?
Yeah, in order for them to understand they've done wrong, they'd have to hand it in. If they don't, they've got to go back home. In the end, the inconvenience to parents will mean that they will hand that phone in.
No, great. Okay, thanks.
And regarding buses, we're hoping that the local authority will allow us to create, the bus company will allow us to create a card in the same way as that they do for Devon County Council, so that we would buy the month or termly ticket and issue the child with a plastic card that would then say that is for that child's, having that termly ticket. So we would buy the ticket ourselves, and then parents would pay us back through parent mail on a weekly basis, so that they got the same level of discount, because it is working out about £30 more expensive a month for a child that's having to buy a daily ticket compared to those that can use the ones on the app.
It's a frustration, though, isn't it, that there's not a neater solution around something like that. How have you navigated buses in London, David?
So we've got boys that travel on buses, tubes. I've got boys that commute for an hour and a half from one end of London to another. We have taught boys what to do when you get lost. And we have celebrated the fact of being enterprising and having a can-do attitude about what you do if you get lost. I did an assembly on Race Across the World, which is one of my favourite TV shows ever. And it wouldn't work if they had smartphones. And we're big on actually having this can-do attitude and learning. With our SEN students, we've made these little cards, and lots of our younger boys have them. They keep them in their blazers. We have taken them out to local shopkeepers and built their confidence that they'll go into a shop, hand the card to the shopkeeper and say, excuse me, I don't know where I am. This is the address and the phone number of my school. Could you ring them for me? So we've taught them how to talk to a stranger, and we've done a lot of work with parents that it's good to talk to strangers, but actually talking to a stranger in person is better than talking to a stranger online. So it's helped us educate the boys around the dangers online.
So you're not constrained by best deals being through apps and being able to need QR codes or anything like that to travel?
No, not in that way. I mean, obviously, that hasn't been an issue for us. I think the issue has been for us, people are used to apps in terms of how to get, there's strikes, there's issues. What if you're standing on a platform and the train can't get you there? And I said, then you turn around and go home. On the 1 in a million chance that you can't get to school, you just go home and I'll swallow the bad attendance. But it just never happens. They just get here another way.
Thanks, David. Any other questions? Can't see any hands.
Can I come in briefly with something on the student survey then? Just it's quite useful to ask. I think in terms of what questions we ask our young people about this, it's really important. And one thing I wanted to share was that I spoke to a group of teenagers recently and asked them who would volunteer to be without their smartphone, and nobody put up a hand. I then said, how many of you wish none of you had one? And the majority of hands went up. So I think in terms of just how the questions that we ask our young people, just really think about that. And we do have a survey on our website, which we're working on at the moment. So just a little thought there. We have another question in the chat. Hand over to you, Miriam.
So question there is, how do your schools work with students with medical issues? For example, diabetes, whether smartphone links to the sensor. Any of the panel want to come in on that important?
I'm happy to take that one, Miriam. That is the only place where we have had to be different, and that is because of the medical needs of those young people and how those phones are linked to their ongoing treatment. I'm concerned that is the long-term need. But equally, the health of those young people, particularly around diabetes, has been much more stable, as we all know, since the introduction of that type of medication. So the only place where we allow a smartphone is for that reason. And those young people have special permissions, but also that is shared with their tutor group so that young person never feels worried that another young person might spot their phone, which can often be quite an anxiety in a school where it's very no phones, and also with members of staff as well.
We do exactly the same, but we also, parents have to come in, they meet with us, they have to agree that social media is not on those phones, and they have to ensure that they monitor that regularly. So we do that. We also have one child that has to have a smartwatch in terms of epilepsy. So those two. The only other thing is that I have had to do is, once I've not been able to confiscate the phone because the child is on a safety plan, in terms of home with a social worker, where part of that safety plan is that they have to be able to make a telephone contact to the social worker. And on the occasion that that's happened, we've then searched that child every morning for over a month, and then with randoms afterwards to ensure that they've not come into school and given a different consequence for that.
Lovely. Thank you, Faye. Any other hands up anywhere? Just scrolling through.
Can I ask a question that just comes up a lot speaking to SLTs, which is regarding the kind of vocal minority of parents that will sort of push back? I know, Dave, you've been very open about some of the nature of that pushback, but what's happened to those parents who were sort of resistant at the beginning? Have they kind of adjusted to the new rule? What's sort of happened there?
Yeah, they massively adjusted. I think I had everything. I was like, oh no, we're going to pull all of our kids out the trip, want the money back. You know, my son will need to leave the school. They won't stay in the sixth form. Everything that they could throw at you, but it's never happened. No one's been pulled off a trip. No one has not gone from year 11 to year 12 because of a phone. No one's been taken out of school. It hasn't affected any of those things at all. And the good thing is we don't talk about it anymore. So I'm talking about it now. We don't talk about phones anymore at school. We talk about all the other amazing things that we do. And parents are brought in because of the amazing things that we do. I would say that now some parents are choosing the school because of the policy, and they might have not chosen the school before. So actually, it's bringing a next generation in. And just to add to one question that someone mentioned about the questions to ask young people in surveys, I often say to the boys at school, what age did you get a smartphone? And then I say, when you are a father, we often talk to them when they're fathers. When you're a father, what age will you give your son or your daughter a smartphone? And they always give an age older than the age that they got a smartphone. And then you can delve into it. Oh, why is that? And they know the dangers. Obviously, the inconvenience of losing their phone would be huge, but they know that they wouldn't want their own children to have those dangers at a young age.
Yeah. And I think just building on that, Dave, what we're seeing talking to younger people is that age of 16, 17, as Charlotte said, as young people are going into the upper years and into sixth form, is really when they're starting to share the damage that they feel was done to them at that younger age. So sixth formers being involved as well as a kind of champion parent community was really useful with the school that I was working with in Devon. Yeah. Young people, yeah, they know. They wish it wasn't there in the first place. Any other questions? And if not, then Claire might hand back to you for some wrapping up or final pieces.
Thank you, Miriam. I just wanted to come in with a follow-up question. Are you, the three of you, seeing things changing in terms of attitudes to tracking and constant contact? Because we're seeing that is just getting, it's kind of spiraling, isn't it? Is that something that you're then finding harder and harder? Are you getting more pushback? And if so, what's your answer to that? Or is it the fact that actually you've just held firm from the start, so you're just not receiving that sort of pushback?
I think that I've just held firm and not engaged with it. I fear that otherwise it feeds itself, and it is unnecessary for the distances that, in particular, my young people travel to and from school. But also the broader fact that they are safer without having them on them in my community in particular. And that is where we've held our line, and we just haven't entertained the discussion around it at all.
Can you say a bit more, Lucy, about being safer without?
There's high levels of mugging in the area where my school is based, and their children are quite a ripe pick. If you think that there are 850 teenagers that walk out of a school at the end of the day, and if there's 850 smartphones, that is quite a captive audience. It is much safer for my young people not to be carrying those phones on them, because they in fact don't then really have anything on them that could be taken, and that has been a really positive thing for the community as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. I think that's very useful. So I know that's one of the key sources of pushback. So just that simplicity of message from you is very, very, very useful. Thank you so much.
Sorry. One final thing, can I just jump in? We're just looping back to this sort of smartphone-free schools unlocking wider social change. Possibly, I suppose, for you, Dave, having introduced the policy last school year, are you seeing an increase in the number of year sevens arriving who just don't own a smartphone at all?
Yeah, for sure. I would say probably about 25% of our year seven parents would say that they would have bought a phone and they've decided not to. This is why I'm really glad that we've got primary heads here. I think we've got 55 feeder schools for 130 children, which is ridiculous. And we need to tighten it up. And actually, if all the primary school heads had the same response as us, then actually we would have boys coming to school that would never have had a phone in the first place. So I think it has to go all the way through. We're doing a really good job. A lot of them already given a phone, and then it makes it harder.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
We're of everyone's time, so we will wrap up there. In terms of next steps, we will send you this recording of the discussion so you can share it with other head teachers if you'd like to, or your colleagues. We know that going smartphone free can be much easier when schools do it together and take that collective action. So, please do get your local schools together on this. And we are really happy to support groups of schools by running webinars. So yeah, always really happy to do that. And we want to support you and make things easy, as we've said. So we'd love feedback on our 3-step plan. If you think it's working, if there's things you think need to be added, and if you would want to see other resources to make things as easy as possible. As we've said, we are campaigning for stronger guidance from government. But until that happens, this is something that we can do now. And as we've heard today, actually the effects of smartphone free schools will ripple out way beyond the school gate. As Dave was just saying, we see that smartphone free schools are really unlocking smartphone free childhoods, which is the ultimate goal. So thank you so much for your time. We know how busy you all are, so we really appreciate it. And yeah, do stay in touch. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining.